Hi, I'm Shawna.
And I'm Liz.
Welcome to Getting Bookish, a weekly podcast where we will talk about different book-related topics, let you know what we're reading, and even answer Q&As from you.
Be sure to visit our website, gettingbookish.com, and check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Getting Bookish. If you enjoy our podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a rating and review, which helps us to be seen by other book lovers.
With all that said, we hope you'll enjoy Getting Bookish with us.
Enjoy the podcast.
Hey! Hi, friends!
Hi, everybody!
I am super excited. I wanted to start today's podcast by talking about this really cool new book I got called Atlas Obscura.
Wow, that is a beast of a book.
It's huge. It's so heavy. I'm like, I can't hold it up. No. But it's called Atlas Obscura, and it's by Joshua Foyer, Dylan Thuras, and Ella Morton. And it's this really cool guidebook to obscure places. And I just got it today, so I haven't gotten to look at it very much yet. But it has 600, this is what it says. It has 600 of the most curious and unusual destinations around the globe.
Fun!
Are featured inside. Yeah, so it was just like really different, but it has like pictures and just talks about like these random places. Oh, here's about deadly things in Australia.
I was just going to say, what is that, Australia?
Yes. Deadly Creatures and One Deadly Plant is the name of that.
So how is it organized?
So it's organized by continent, it looks like.
Okay.
And it just has these really cool like sections. Like here's in the United States, there's this unclaimed baggage place that you can go shop the unclaimed baggage. Like
you can buy people's forgotten things and lost things.
Buy people's things. So anyway, it's really kind of fun, and I don't travel very much, but I love to look at travel books, and I'm pretty much totally obsessed with this book. So it's super cool. It's called Atlas Obscura, and I believe it just came out like toward the end of last year, so it's pretty new.
That looks really fun.
Yeah! So that's a little different, unless we want to talk about that I have a bad habit of buying travel books, even though I don't travel anywhere.
Oh, really?
Maybe,
like you're living vicariously through the book?
Right? I think so. I think like I like to look at cookbooks, although I have no intention of cooking anything. So those are my first two bookish confessions for tonight's topic. Yeah. So we're gonna confess a few things tonight, Shawna. Are you ready to be honest about your book habits?
I think so.
Okay.
Perhaps.
So my first question for us, hopefully, is an easy-ish one.
Let's wade in slowly here.
Yes. So my first question is, what books do you wish you had already read?
Oh.
I know, but think about it this is how I like kind of phrased it in my mind. Books that like I want to have read, but the reason I haven't read is because they're probably like they're going to take a lot of time.
Okay. Well,
so
instantly I have one that comes to mind.
All right, let's hear it.
Lord of the Rings.
You've never read it?
I've never read it, and I love the movies. I don't know if that's going to give me backlash or not, because
hopefully not.
I don't know what they've changed book to movie. I know a lot of people are very, very passionate about that. But and I have nothing against reading Lord of the Rings, but the thing is that it's very intense and very long, and it's a completely different world. And I know all books are, but it's like this legit world out there with its own language and
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like that's not something that I can just cart with me and read a couple paragraphs here and there. I need to really be able to sit down and focus on this book. And I've never been able to do that. So that's kind of on my bucket list. And I wish I have read it. I wish I had time to read it. One day I will.
I love that. And I think that's exactly what this question is what are those books that are so hard to dedicate the time to? And I agree with Lord of the Rings. I am fortunate enough to have read them when I was a teenager, so I can already check them off my list. But I remember as a teenager where I had ample amounts of free time, they were hard books to get through because they're written in a time when flowery language was very much the norm. Mm-hmm. And so they're very dense description-wise, and you can't, like, just gloss over them. You can't read them real quick because they have an extremely dedicated fan base. And so you can't be like, oh, yeah, I read those, sort of.
Right.
Because, like, that's even worse than saying that you haven't read them.
Right.
Because
and you have to know there's races, like, and different these creatures that are all throughout the books, and you can't, it's like math. If you don't understand it from the very beginning, but you keep pushing, you're not gonna be able to get anywhere. By the time you hit like calculus and trig, you're done. You're checked out.
Right. I don't know what the fandom says is the correct order to read them in, but I would definitely start with The Hobbit if you wanted to.
I have read The Hobbit.
Okay, you have read The Hobbit, because I think that's the most approachable story-wise.
Yes, and I have to say, I guess this goes under confession, too.
All right.
There's like a couple parts of this. I have read The Hobbit, but it was required reading in middle school. Yep. I see the eyes. They just get glossed over as soon as there's required reading. And
it
so
doesn't matter.
It's
homework then.
Exactly. And here's what made it worse. Not only was it required reading, but it was required out loud reading in class. So we each had to read a paragraph around the class. And that's like 24 kids, probably 23 of them who have zero interest, and all different ways of reading a book out loud. A lot of kids couldn't pronounce some of the words that were in the book, and nobody was having fun. So I did read it, but I didn't enjoy it, and I have not read it since, but I love the movie, and I want to reread it. I feel like I can't count that as being read, even though I know the story. But it was required reading, and it ruined it for me for like a decade.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, because anytime something is required, it does take a lot of the joy out of it. I would say wait until your boys are a little older, and then you guys could read it all together, and it might be a fun...
Oh, yes. Yeah, we definitely plan on doing that. I can't wait.
So a couple of the books that I wish I had already read, one of them is Anna Karenina.
Oh, I would have just assumed you've read that.
I've started it like 3 times, and it's a daunting read. It's huge. Mm-hmm. Again, like that heavy description language. It's just kind of hard to get through, so I've never finished that. I would love to say that I've read Lord of the Flies, which I have not. And it was so interesting because right when the Hunger Games came out, everybody was making all of those comparisons between the two. And I'm like, I have not read that book. It's terrible. And then another one I had on my list was Lolita, which is just, so it's another like these heavy Russian classics, I think, are the books on my list, because they're just tough to get through. But a more fun book that I haven't read, because again, it's a big book, a big undertaking, is Outlander.
I was going to mention that along with Lord of the Rings for the very same purpose of it just having, there's so much to it.
Yeah. And again, giant fandom, so you can't fake it.
And I love the movie or the show, I have to say.
I have not seen the show, and I want to watch the show, except like I try to make it a rule that I'm not going to watch it until I've read the book. And I got the audio book, and it was recorded a long time ago, I believe. And like the quality wasn't very high, and I didn't enjoy the reader. Have you listened to it?
I did, and because here's the thing, and I may listen to Lord of the Rings on audiobook if I just can't, because I love the voices and the narration of it on an audiobook. If I don't feel like I can do the pronunciation justice, things like that for a book.
Right. And I bet there's a really good version of
I'm sure there is. But for Outlander, so I thought the same thing. I was like, I'll get the audiobook. And I was listening to it. Well, first of all, the woman who's narrating it, I'm like, is this like a 60-year-old smoker? Like,
thank you.
I couldn't get past the fact that she's supposed to be a somewhat young woman, and the voice just was not. I couldn't connect to it, and I hate to say that because she read it well, but yeah, like the quality of it, and I just couldn't, and I wanted to so bad.
So did I, because I really do want to read them. When I worked at the library, several of the librarians, it was like their most favorite series. They were obsessed even with the author. They just talked about these books all the time. So I was like, I am going to read these books. Now, I don't read a lot of adult fiction. But I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to read these books. And I had a hard time reading the book. And so usually that's when I go to the audio version, because I love being told a story.
Right.
But no.
Yeah, and so, I hate saying that because
I wish I had read it already.
Right? And I hate saying that about the narrator, but it's when you have a narrator that isn't clicking with the way you see the character, it doesn't matter if they're amazing or not. It's not going to work for you, because I just couldn't even get over the voice, but she got great reviews on the reading.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think as far as audiobooks go, there are some readers that I've like written them down, and I just don't enjoy the way that they read. And so when I see, like, I'm like, oh, I want to listen to this audiobook, and then I see they've narrated it, I just automatically know for myself that I would enjoy the book better.
That's so funny.
So, yeah. I love audiobooks, but
maybe we need to buddy read Outlander.
We should. Oh, that would be fun. I think it's such a thick book.
Well, yeah, and there's like 10 of them?
Yeah.
In the series, and they're all gigantic.
They're enormous. Which I shouldn't say that, because I do read a lot of fantasy, and fantasy books tend to be like 800 pages. But they also have a lot of storylines happening, and I don't know, maybe that's happening in Outlander. I really have zero experience, because I almost know nothing about it, actually.
Yeah. One of the other books, it just flashed through my mind that I haven't read, and I wish that I would have back when it was a huge big deal, and I have the whole series, is the Left Behind series.
Oh.
Did you ever read those?
Yeah.
Did you read all of them?
I think so.
Of course you did.
Right. Well, I think I was in high school.
That sounds about right. Especially when they became a huge deal. Like, everything was about Left Behind, and
oh, yeah.
I know what it's about, and I'm very interested. I think during that time, I may have been in the military, and I was all over the place in different duty stations and training. So I feel like I kind of missed the boat on that one. but which I was in the Navy. Do you get that? I missed the boat. Anyway.
You're so funny.
But I wish that's a book that I wish that I read back then when everybody was reading it. And do you ever feel that way? Like you've missed the mark and now it's kind of too late to read it, even though that makes no sense?
No, I feel like that sometimes with books. They have like this huge like bubble and everyone has read them and everyone is talking about them. And then it's like, maybe it's not the exact kind of book that I would normally spend a lot of time reading. And so do I want to read it 10 years later or 5 years later?
Right.
After everyone's done and they're done talking about it? Like,
I know.
am I going to have anyone to talk to? I don't know.
Right. I feel like I'll go to my literary society meeting and I'll say, okay, I've read, Left Behind. And they'll say, wow, that's so 2000 or something. Good job. 20 years later, busting it out. I want to read it still, but you know what? It doesn't have that same drive and passion, kind of like The Nightingale, The Great Alone. That's what it is? Great Alone, right? Kristen Hanna?
Yeah.
The one, they go to Alaska. Like those right now are the really big in books for her. And so I want to read those. Not that I'm a bandwagon reader, but I do kind of have a little bit of FOMO when it comes to people talking about a book. And I'm like, I kind of want to read it so I can get in on the conversation.
I absolutely agree. I'm definitely the same way. And sometimes it's hard to go back and read those older books because just like with an older audiobook, books that were published 15 or 20 years ago, they aren't the same kind of books that we're reading right now. And so they're not a classic. They haven't been labeled a modern classic. And so sometimes they're a little awkward to read, like they are using really outdated technology. And so contemporary fiction that's just a little bit older, for me anyway, this isn't really a confession, this is just reality. It's just not as enjoyable of a read. So, speaking of more confessions, this is a nice hot topic one.
Oh no.
What? I love how you dress. You're like,
I know.
What's coming next?
Because I really don't know.
What? Right. Surprise. What is a book you hate? Or at least really don't like? And if you need a second to think, I can go first.
Yeah, go first.
Okay. Since I'm just springing these on you. So
you seem really excited to talk about the books you hate.
Right. Shawna and I have talked about this before, but my favorite reviews that I write are for books that I don't like. Like I love to write a review about a book that I did not enjoy. But this is a book that I've never reviewed. I never felt the need to, and I just loathe it entirely.
Wow.
It's The Great Gatsby.
Whoa.
I know. They're going to come for me in the comments.
Yeah. What is it about The Great Gatsby? Is it the 20s or the...
No, I love the story, the actual story of The Great Gatsby. I love.
Okay.
I love the story. I hate the narrator. Not the audiobook, but right. The person who, because it's told in the I voice, and I can't even remember his name right now, and he's untrustworthy, which usually I like in a narrator, but he grates on my nerves like nothing else. And I feel like when they made this last movie, the last iteration of it has Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and everyone was so obsessed. I feel like every party for a year was Great Gatsby themed, and everybody wanted like their cute 20s hair, and they wore these cute Daisy Buchanan headbands.
Yeah, but did any of those people read the book?
I have no idea.
Probably not.
And I'm just like, how do you like this? This is awful. So that is definitely my hot topic book whenever I bring that up and people are like, "Oh, what's a book you really don't like?" I'm like, The Great Gatsby. Like I don't even have to think about it. I may
Wow.
never be able to tell you what my favorite book is, but I can tell you what my least favorite book is. This
That's
is pretty
hilarious.
harsh. I may be I mean, there are some other books that I definitely haven't enjoyed. I didn't enjoy Moby Dick at all. Probably because I had a college professor who was obsessed with the book. I think that was just what broke it for me. But that's a weird book. I don't like it. I did not enjoy Crazy Rich Asians.
I haven't
Did you read
tried
that?
to read that. I wanted to, but your face right now is kind of telling me to move
It's
on to
just
the next.
I feel like maybe the movie is super fantastic, and that's why I read it was because the movie was coming out, and I was like, oh, I'll read this book, and I tried listening to the audio, and I didn't enjoy the narrator very much, so I was like, oh, I'll just read it, and it's just a really underdeveloped story with underdeveloped characters, and I was like, why'd they turn this? There's wonderful movies, wonderful books out there. Why did this one get turned into a movie? And I realized that it's wonderful to feature different cultures, but I'm like, I'm sure there are better books
Yeah.
about like this other culture and
And this is
like
not one of them.
non-white characters. I mean, I know that it's important to see those things, and that's not why I didn't like it. I just felt like the whole book lacked character development.
Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to think of a book that I hated. And
While you're listening to me very passionately say
yes,
that
I'm like,
I
oh my gosh, I don't know if I have a book that I hate. Well, I really, really hated Dark Matter, which was a science or a science
I think
what
it's
is
science fiction.
science fiction, yeah. And but I'm trying to think of one that maybe I've disliked my whole life, like I feel like you have. Oh, I have one. I do have one.
Let's hear it.
First, let me finish. Let me wrap this up with Dark Matter here. I got this because the ratings were great. It's totally out of my comfort zone, and that could be a huge reason why I didn't like it. Huge. But it was one of those, and it was one of those that I probably just should have stopped reading. But that's a whole nother podcast too, but it's really hard for me to do that. I feel like I keep waiting for it to do something amazing, and it never did.
Shauna's bookish confession is that she doesn't like to quit reading books.
It was just one of those where I'm like, this is dumb. I can't even, this would never happen. Meanwhile, I know it's fiction. So obviously this is a story, you know?
Right.
But I'm just like, not even in somebody's made up world should this happen. And it just got more and more far-fetched. And then I just started getting annoyed. And once you get annoyed, it's really hard to get out of that. So whenever I see that book, I just get angry. But one that I didn't like from long ago was Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities.
Ooh.
Yes. And the reason is it was assigned and in my AP English class. And there's a couple different stories behind this, but she assigned it. I read it and I took the test and I failed it. And I had never failed a test. Like I was an A+ student, honor roll, everything. I loved homework. I loved assignments. So for me to fail, I was devastated because I read the book, and the note she put on the top was, you need to make sure to read the book next time. And that was just a dagger to my soul because I thought I did read the book. And then I started to feel stupid. Like, is this book too above my intelligence? Is that why? I mean, all of these questions because of her note. And so I went to her and I said, I did read the book. I can tell you about the story. I can tell you all about it. And she said, well, I'll let you retake the test. And I said, okay, absolutely. I'll retake it. So I read the book again. And what I did this time was every single chapter I read, I then wrote a book review, almost a chapter review on that chapter. Because I'm thinking maybe it's his style of writing that I'm just not understanding, or that's a little bit different or confusing to me, because it is a pretty, Charles Dickens. It's a little bit harder than other books. And so I wrote these chapter reviews, and then I would study them. Okay, I understand that, and I understand this, and I did that all the way through to the book. I retake the test, and I failed it again. And
so when the book opens with, it was the best of time.
It was totally the worst of times.
This was the worst of time.
Yes. And I took it to her and I said, I read the book like I wrote chapter reviews on every single chapter. And she said, well, I'm sorry, you failed the test. I can't give you a passing grade. And that is actually one of I know this is like kind of a weird transition or side note of why we homeschool. Because I don't want my children to think that they can't understand something simply because they can't pass a test on it. Because I could tell you all about the book, but for some reason I couldn't answer the way the questions were worded on the test. So I feel like that whole scenario of high school just made me really hate this book. I'm not against giving it a second try, but
it's a tough one. I feel like, I read it in high school. I know I read it. I just quoted the first line of it to you. And I think I read it again in college, actually, but I can't really tell you what the story was about. Like, I can tell you what the story's about, but what it's really about, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's okay to say this is a Victorian age story, and I'm just not going to connect with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I can connect with other stories. This doesn't have to be the one. So what about other general confessions?
General confessions.
So one of my general confessions is I really, 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 I love reading a hardback. Let me start. I love reading a hardback book. I don't want to read the paperback. I don't want to own the paperback. They don't look very nice after you read them. I'm not a paperback person.
Mm-hmm.
But my confession is I cannot read a book with the dust jacket on.
Oh, interesting.
It makes me crazy. I feel like it like slips up or it slips down, or I'm having to like work to hold it in place. So today I was getting ready to go to the bookstore, and I only had like 10 pages left in my other book, so then I had to get this book ready. And so the first thing I did was I took the dust jacket off because I just can't with the dust jacket.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the dust jacket? Do you have a certain place that you put it, or do you just put it on your desk?
Yeah. So I keep it. I actually have a little basket for them. It's
That's
cute. It's a whole routine. But I just, even when I read picture books, I take the dust jacket off.
Really?
It's like, because once you open the book, there's all this extra paper
Space. Yeah.
in the back. And I'm like, what am I supposed, like, it's against me? Because if I'm reading a picture book aloud, like, I'm opening it and
it
I'm
hits you in the
reading
face.
over the top. Like, I'm reading it, upside down already. Like, so that's all the challenge I can have when I'm reading a book aloud.
What if it's a library book, how they tape it on?
Well, see, that doesn't bother me because it's taped in place. It doesn't shift around while I'm reading it.
That's funny. That doesn't bother me, but I feel like if I took the dust jacket off, I would lose it because I lose everything, or my kids would destroy it. So I think...
Because it is just a piece of paper. Like, it's not...
Now, you mentioned something about paperbacks. This is totally going to be a confession.
Okay.
So, I do like paperbacks, and I like them for one purpose. Well, not one purpose, but don't kill me. I love folding it, like when I'm reading it like this. But I'm so weird. So if you're listening to our podcast, we're kind of doing a show and tell here. I have this paperback book, and I'm folding it over so that you can hold it, you know, I don't know how to really describe this, but you know what I mean. You open it.
You can hold it then with one hand.
You can hold it with one hand.
So just one side of the page is showing.
But that means that I love reading this side of the book, because when I go here, the words are curled around, so that's kind of annoying. But for some reason, I really love when paperback books have that really used, broken in spine look to them, where they're just kind of awkward and creased, and they look red and they look worn, because I feel like if a paperback looks really worn and red and the spine is broken in, then maybe that's a good book. Maybe it's been read a couple times. So that's, but side note, I do not do this to books that I borrow from other people. Just so that I do take care of them.
You want to say that out loud,
yes,
so people don't stop loaning you books.
Right? This is my
don't
own
loan
book.
your books to Shawna. She folds them in half.
And not only do I fold them in half when we're talking about folding, but these are my own books, and I do sometimes fold a corner. I know. I'm so sorry. That probably just hurt your eyes to look at.
Did you? Now, I already knew this about Shawna. So, Shawna, I tagged you in something on Facebook yesterday, and it said that there are two types of people in this world. Mm-hmm. Bookworms, and there's like this nice book there with like this gorgeous bookmark in it, and monsters. And then the other page is a book that has the corner folded down on the page. And I just had to laugh because I was like, okay, that may be a little extreme.
That's me.
But...
yeah, it drives my husband nuts. And you know what's funny is when I get a book from the library, again, with borrowed books from the library or from my friends or whatever, I don't do that. I'm very, very careful. But I figure if I bought it, I can do whatever I want with it.
And this is so true.
Yeah. But I look through them and I'm like, ooh, a page corner person was reading this one. And I can see, because you can see the crease. Like the crease doesn't go away. So you can see all the creases.
That's so funny. Well,
hey everyone, we are actually going to stop this conversation here because we went on pretty long. Obviously, we have a lot of bookish confessions. So join us next week for part 2 of our conversation, and we hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out with us. Don't forget to check us out on social media and subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any of the fun. See you next week.